I just want to talk a little bit about the Epstein files, but coming from a different perspective. Um, I made a post the other day to say that, I will not go after Ivanka again. Many people disagree with me, and I'm surprised about the number of people that disagree with me about it. Anyway, so if you have been a victim of sexual assault, sexual harassment, or sexual abuse, it is not easy. It is not always easy, first of all, to come forward. That's number one. And I'm speaking from experience. It took me over 30 years to come forward and acknowledge that this has happened. And one of my greatest regrets is that I never told my parents. I was scared that my parents will hold the same views that the person who assaulted me and his family holds. Um, Moreover, when it is an intimate assault that takes place in a home perpetrated by a relative, I, I, I'm dumbfounded really, because if you take any ordinary child that is put in that situation as a person of color, I know that how the community can protect these pedophiles, how this Uncle JJ or Uncle Ray, gets privileges above the person, the child that he is sexually assaulting. The children are always asked to hide or go away or don't interact with Uncle Ray, but Uncle Ray is never held accountable. Now imagine if you have a very powerful father, or a very rich father to begin with, and he perpetrates or wants to perpetrate these acts of violence, sexual violence on you, it puts you in a very difficult position as a child, because first of all, you have nowhere to turn to, because nobody is going to believe you. Even if people see the evidence in front of their face, they will not believe it. Now, this young lady, Trump's daughter, she is no different, in my opinion, from any other person that has been put in the position. Now, I'm going to make the disclaimer right now that I don't know whether it happened, but we have all seen many pictures and photos of them together, and we've heard how we talked about her. I personally watched the Wendy Williams show one time when him and Ivanka was on, and that was an eye opener for me. And Ivanka was already a young lady by then. But having said all of that, I would like for you to put your shoes in the victims of sexual assault. Take, for example, Jean Carroll. We all cheered on when Jean Carroll came forward and she sued Trump, and she won. What makes Ivanka different? Is it because we hate her father? Or is it because we think she could have walked away? Do we think that her psyche is different from any other person or child that has been put in that position? I cannot even begin. I mean, I'm not qualified to describe the psychology that goes along with being sexual assaulted, but I can only speak from my own experience. When I was sexually assaulted, I just decided to leave. I hastily left the one city where I was in South Africa, and then I departed for overseas. I lived everywhere, and my life was a mess. That event defined who I am today. I I could never have I could never have fulfilling relationships with men, or with people with men, because I was always on guard. Okay, I had to learn to see men through a different lens. It took me more than 30 years to realize that. Moreover, besides my outlook that had to change, I had to also learn to love myself, to not to not blame myself for what happened. I had to look into myself and find the courage to move forward. I had to question the values that I was brought up with. If perhaps if I was brought up in a different way, maybe I would have reacted different. Maybe it wouldn't have happened. Maybe I would have had the courage to stand up and come out and and tell people sooner. But the bottom line is that very few women feel that they can come out and say, unless if somebody is caught red-handed and there are police nearby. There are very few people that has been raped by acquaintances or family or close friends, or even if it's a stranger, they don't come forward, because I was very scared when that happened. And like I said before, it defined who I was and who I was going to be in the future. I never, for many years, I never lived up to my potential. I um, I was just existing, you know. But now at this age, I realize that if I had just had the courage to come forward earlier, perhaps I would have spared myself a whole lot of the pain and the struggles that I have been through. Now, I don't think that having money plays a role in that. I don't think that having money will force you to come forward. I think, in my opinion, I think maybe money will be more of a hamstring. It puts us, all sexual assault victims, on the same level. That the person that has perpetrated the act has some power over us, because that's what sexual assault is about. It's about power. So I'm not here to change your mind about what you feel about women that are, about people that are sexually assaulted. I am not here to make a case for anybody, but what I'm here to tell you is my point of view. And the pain that we go through is incomparable. It is not something you'll never forget the pain. Let me put it that way. It is not something that you can brush off one day and say, I'm over this, I'm moving forward. It is like you are an addict and you are always going to relapse into the deep, dark cycle of depression, because this is what sexual assault does. It holds you hostage. Whether you come out and say it happened, whether the perpetrator face justice or not, the 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 big thing is that the victim still suffers. The victim are the one that has to weigh up everything and say, like I thought that if I tell my parents, they are going to, my father especially, that he was going to blame me. um, I couldn't do it to my mom, because I loved her and still love her too much to put her through that. So I bear the cross alone for many, many, many years. And eventually, when this guy contacted me via, he found me on the internet and wanted to be friends, and that's when I decided enough was enough. It wasn't a calculated decision. It was just something that came forth in me and said enough was enough. Now my hope is that every person that has been sexually assaulted will come to the point where they say enough is enough. And we still bear our pain, but we cannot grant absolution to our perpetrators. We cannot be held accountable for the actions of our perpetrators, especially when we are were in a moment of vulnerable, especially when, if it's a younger person, you know, a child. It is, I think it is unfathomable to think that people will say that, you know, children are resilient and they will get over it. You never get over something like this. The trauma stays with you for the rest of your life. You never um, you never reconcile what happened to you with who you are. It leaves an indelible stain on your soul. I recall I went out, it was probably 20 years after I was sexually assaulted, and I went to a party, and there was a young guy, and he was maybe 19 or so, and I was already mature, you know, and he made me so uncomfortable. And I left because I couldn't face that. I didn't have the guts to face him. He was touchy. He was a tall guy, putting his hands on my shoulders, and the more I said no, the more he just continued. And that that broke me again. I had to It took me another 10 years after that to get over everything. So I'm asking you to be empathetic, to think before you ink, to think before you condemn us, because we are not sexually assaulted because we asked for it. We were merely put in a situation that we never wanted to be in.